Please be seated. The court is now back in session. I now hand over to the National Defense Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia. You may now put your question. Counsel Sonarun. Mr. President, thank you very much. I have only a few more questions left. You mentioned that you later worked at the former S-21, and then when the Vietnamese came, that place were renamed as Tuls Lang School. Was that correct? Yes, at that time they called that place Tuls Lang. Question. Who was the chairman or the officer in charge of Tuls Lang when you worked there? Response. The director at that time there was a signboard at the gate which read Genocide Museum or so, and then Mai Lam was the director. He was of Vietnamese nationality, but he spoke French. Thank you. Question. Did you wonder why a Vietnamese was put in charge of the Genocide Museum because there were Cambodian national? Why was the Vietnamese put in charge of that place? Response. At that time, Vietnamese soldiers were everywhere across Cambodia. Wherever you went, you would meet Vietnamese soldiers. Question. When you worked there, according to your previous statements, you were tasked to re-document the various documents that had been scattered around, and you archived those documents to keep record of them for the latter states administration. When you were collecting and gathering those evidence, did you notice the structure of the former S-21? Because if it was a working place, there should be an organizational structure of the place. Did you encounter any written organizational structure of the place? Response. What drew my attention at that time was that I had a friend of mine who also returned from France. He was a former teacher of philosophy, and he saw me from the distance, and he approached me, telling me that if I like documents, then I should come to this place because there were plenty of documents here. And my main goal at that time was to see the confession of my friends who returned from overseas. Actually, at that time, I was still wondering where my friend had gone missing. I wanted to know because people said they had disappeared. So I went there in order to look for certain documents about their whereabouts, and I wanted to see the confession and documents at Tuas Line. And that's why I came to work at Tuas Line in consultation with my Lam. He asked me to assist the work at Tuas Line, and I started working from that time onward. And when I was working there, I was looking at various documents in search for the names of my friends who were in prison there and made and provided confession there. And as for the structure, I knew that Deutsch was the chairman of S21, but I did not dwell on the structure because I worked there for a short period of time, and I was still suffering a very painful memory because of the loss of my close friends over there. I did not think much at that time. What I wanted to do was to look for the names of my friends in those documents. Question. My question was to ask you about the structure of S21 during the Khmer Rouge regime. Did you encounter any document indicating the structure of former S21? Response. I did not bother to dwell on that issue. I only knew that Deutsch was the chairman of S21. Thank you. I now would like to turn to another topic. When you became a member of the Phung and Grung, and Phung and Grung was joining efforts with the Communist Party of Cambodia to fight against the American imperialists. Did you know Nguyen Chia when you became a member of Phung and Grung? Response. I came to hear his name more clearly when he signed a document endorsing the confession of prisoners at Tuas Line. At that time, I learned that he held a position of importance in the democratic Cambodia. Question. You said that you saw the signature of the on the confession of prisoner at Tuas Line. Can you tell the court the people who affixed their signature on those confessions? I saw the signatures of those Cambodian returnees. I cannot enumerate their names now because there were hundreds of them. Can you recall one or two of them, your close friends? And those confession was endorsed and signed by Nguyen Chia. Can you tell the court your close friends who were in prison there? Response. I cannot recall it on the top of my head now, but I did come across it at that time. During the period between 1975 to 1979, did you know what position Nuon Chea held in the democratic Cambodia? Did you ever hear or know what position Nuon Chea held during the entire period of democratic Cambodia? Mr. Lawyer, out of respect, I would like to respond to your question again. I never knew Mr. Nuon Chea, and I had never known him before I started my work at the Tuals Line. Question. If so, you are saying that you only came across the signature of Mr. Nuon Chea after you started working at S21. When you started working from August to November 1979, is it correct to summarize that? Yes, that is correct. Question. When you saw the signature of Mr. Nuon Chea, did you know the content of the document? Did you read the document thoroughly, and what was it about? I only saw that there was a signature, his signature, and I was told by other colleagues that that was the signature of Mr. Nuon Chea, and they also told me that Nuon Chea was someone with a position of importance in the previous regime. So I have to repeat it again and again that I did see the signature, and the signature was actually on the documents that was stored at Tuals Line. Question. If you saw the signature of Mr. Nuon Chea at that time, do you think that you can recall it if I present you another signature of Mr. Nuon Chea? Do you think that you can still recognize his signature? Response. I cannot recognize it because I never knew Nuon Chea at that time. At that time, Ung Pech and Kong Sinrat told me that that signature belonged to Nuon Chea, and I did not really take note of the special feature of his signature, so I cannot really recall. If you present me a signature now, I don't think that I can compare it or recognize it, because I did not have an expertise in it. Question. When you arrived in Cambodia, you said you saw a document about Samdech Sihanouk, who the document about Samdech Sihanouk resigning from the leadership of the Democratic Cambodia. I am sorry, I would like to rephrase my and simplify my question. When you returned to Cambodia, did you ever see any document concerning the application for the tendering of resignation of Samdech Norodom Sihanouk, document dated the 11th March 1976? I did not know what the state of Cambodia was called officially at that time. I did not know whether or not it was a democratic Cambodia or it was still the Krung. But my question is, did you ever see the letter of resignation of Samdech Norodom Sihanouk at that time from the leadership of Response: I did not remember it, but at that time we did not have access to media, to newspaper either, but we heard it from radio. I did not remember the exact date when that was announced. Question: you said just now you heard it on the radio broadcast that Samdech Norodom Sihanouk was to resign from his post. And you also know that at that time Samdech Norodom Sihanouk was the president of Phung and Grung. He was the leaders, your leader, because you were members of Phung or Grung. Now, did you ever wonder that why Samdech Sihanouk had to resign from his post? Did you know the reason or motivation behind his resignation? Response: I did not bother to ask about that question at all, because at that time I was in the refugee, and I was quite concerned of my personal safety, because I was trapped in the detention. Actually, I had wondered about that myself, but I did not bother to ask that question because I was being in detention myself. Question: it was in mid-March 1976. According to your testimony before the court, you said you returned to Cambodia in December 1976. So it means that you came to Cambodia after Samdech Norodom Sihanouk had already declared his resignation. So when he tendered his resignation, you were still in France, and you also learned about his resignation as well. You heard it from a radio broadcast. So my question is, did you ever wonder to yourself why he decided to resign, and particularly those who follow him from the very beginning, why he resigned from his post, and did that raise concerns among his followers? The President, I note the prosecutor is on his feet. You may proceed.
Thank you. This is not an objection per se, but the lawyer mentioned that the witness came back in December 76. Oh, that's what I heard. But I think it was July 76. I think that clarification is worth making, Mr. President.
The President, the lead co-lawyer for the civil party, you may proceed. Mr. Pech Ong. Thank you, Mr. President. Before us, we have the witness who is now testifying before the chamber based on what he saw, what he came across during the relevant period of the closing order. The questions that is being put by Mr. Sonarun now is to elicit his personal observation of the event which he was not involved and he did not see directly by his own eyes. So I would like to object based on this basis. Mr. Sonarun, I would like to respond to both the prosecution and the representative of the civil parties. The witness joined the resistance movements in the 1960s. So he was active already, and he knew a lot of information concerning the resistance movements. And if he said that he did not know about the resignation of Samdech Norodom Sihanouk, on the 3rd of July 3rd of March 1976. So I simply would like to ask the witness, in his capacity as the supporter, as a member, did he ever wonder why Samdech Sihanouk resigned, and would that have any problems to the other followers? That is all for my question, President. Thank you. So now I would like to hand over to the defense counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari to put the question to this witness. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors. And good afternoon to everyone in and around the courtroom, and especially good afternoon to you, sir. Along with Mr. Angodom, we represent Mr. Ieng Sari. First, let me begin by asking you some questions about your background. Could you please tell us what university degrees you hold?
I studied for a master's degree, but I could not finish it due to my illness.
Well, according to sources, they say that you abandoned your PhD studies in order to come to Cambodia in 1976. So let me go back. Were you in a PhD program? Were you in a master's program? Did you ever receive a bachelor's degree? Because you were in France from 1965 to 1976 as a student.
Response. I studied political economy, but I did not complete this study.
Thank you. So I take it from that answer, you don't hold even a bachelor's degree in political economics or economics or any of the social sciences. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when you put down or when you represent that you abandoned your PhD studies, that's stretching the truth, is it not?
In the French education system, tertiary education system, that was allowed.
Very well. Let me move on. Now, you've indicated to us, and you've indicated in your statements, that subsequent to the coup d'etat, you became a member of the Khmer Student Union. And that would be sometime in 1970. Is that correct? Now, you had been in France since 1965. May I ask, from 65 to 70, were you politically active in any way?
like other students, I joined the political movements with French students.
And does that mean that you were just talking politics among other fellow students, or were you engaged in an organization, a club, a committee that belonged to a particular political spectrum?
At that time, I sympathize those who were in the leftist movement. And when I was a student over there were movements in France, and I participated along with other friends.
All right. Now, you've indicated that you knew of Kyu Sampon, Huinem, Hunyun. Were you aware of their studies, what they had studied at university?
I read the thesis written by Kyu Sampon, by Hunem, and by Huyun.
Thank you very much. You anticipated my next question. I wanted to ask that question. Thank you. Now, when you were a member of the Khmer Student Union, could you please tell us how active you were?
I was active in the sense that I was in the international house. I joined in the meetings with foreign students to talk about the issues in Cambodia. I contacted various other students' movements.
And may I ask how many students, how many Cambodians were members of the Khmer Student Union when you were a member?
I cannot recall it clearly. At least there were 50.
And can you please tell us whether the Khmer Student Union had a president, a vice president, a treasurer, secretary? Were there officers elected to that student union?
Yes, there was a system like that.
And was there a charter which set out the rules of this organization?
Yes, there was a bylaw of the union in the form of the bylaw for the association. So we can call it an internal statute of the union.
Was there a president at the time when you were there, when you were a member, and if so, who was the president or presidents during the period when you were a member of the Khmer Student Union?
When I was a member, Suong Sikun was the president of the union.
All right. Now, were there factions within the Khmer Student Union? In other words, ideologically, from left or center to far left?
There were two movements within the union. The one major movement was those senior students who had contact with the French Communist Party, and after the coup d'etat, there were younger Cambodian students who tend to bend toward the Chinese party.
And where did you lean? In which faction were you associated with or leaning towards?
I was in the center.
Okay. Now, in your statement, and I'm referring to E3/97 in your statement, and Khmer ERN number is 00270684 to 86. In French, 00241883 to 84. In English, 00287100. You are asked a question: why was the Khmer Students' Union dissolved in 1971? And here you say that Ing Sri took the decision to dissolve the movement. And I want to focus on that a little bit, and then we're going to go to an earlier part of your answer. Now, from the charter, can you please explain to us how it is that someone who is not a member of the Khmer Student Union could dissolve the Khmer Student Union, which had a president at a time of which you were a member of?
At that time, in France, there were various associations who supported the 5-point appeal by Notre Dame Sihanouk. And then there were different names popping up as associations. Ieng Sari gave advice to those associations to resolve in order to form just one union, and they all agreed.
All right. So if I understand your answer, he didn't dissolve this union, but he gave advice as to what the students running the union who were of different factions might do. Would that be an accurate way of putting your answer?
The advice was given by Ieng Sari to the president of each association, and they all agreed to his advice, and that was the reality back then.
So in other words, he took no decision, he gave advice which was accepted.
In my understanding, it was an order because everyone had to implement the line put by Evidentiary.
All right. Let me make sure I understand your testimony correctly. Here you say he took a decision. Earlier you said that he gave advice because there were three factions. Now you're changing your story and you're saying he gave an order. Do you see three different versions to a question being posed to you? Do you see that you're giving three different versions?
I respond to your question in the sense that everyone gave the value to Evidentiary's words. It was like a magic. So whatever word you use, a request or a suggestion, or whatever, everybody would follow his words.
Okay, let's move on now. Now you've indicated that at some point you were getting your information from Funk because there was a bulletin being put out. Am I correct?
What kind of information?
Thank you for pointing out my question was incomplete. Information concerning what was happening in Cambodia, as I understand your testimony from yesterday, that a bulletin was being circulated by Funk. And I believe you also indicated that something was even being printed in Paris.
It was known as the Funk Bulletin back then.
Well, who was circulating the bulletin? Under which title? Because you've indicated that in Paris, something was being printed and circulated. So who was printing it? What was the title of it? Who wrote the content of it?
In general, the content was derived from the radio broadcast of the Funk. And the one who circulated the bulletin was the students.
All right. So, as I understand it, somebody's listening to the radio, transcribing what they heard, and then circulating to those who might not have heard what was on the radio, coming from Funk. Do I have it right?
Yes, because in Paris, you could not tune to the front channel, but the text was sent from Hanoi or from elsewhere to Paris. That was the general context.
Well, that was going to be in my next question. Do you know exactly where it was coming from and who was actually writing the content of what was being circulated? Because you've also indicated at this point in time, we have the former king, the former head of state, Prince Norodom Sihanouk, who is the head of Funk for all intents and purposes, correct?
I don't understand your question.
Where was the broadcasting coming from? and who was responsible for the content. Because by this point in time, you've indicated that Prince Sihanouk was head of FUNK, unless I have it wrong.
As a matter of fact, Prince Norodom Sihanouk was the head of the FUNK, and usually he also had his own bulletin. He likes to have his own bulletin, and another bulletin came from the FUNK office, and the content was also broadcast on the FUNK radio.
And this information that you were getting from Prince Sihanouk, from his bulletin, was it the same or basically the same information that was in the other bulletin, or was it radically different?
Generally, the bulletin coming out of Sihanouk was about his own activities.
All right. Now, as I understand it from your testimony today, but also from looking at your book, you give credit to Professor Chandler for encouraging you to write your own book. Is that correct? Do I have it right?
No, that is not correct. Because I already completed my draft, and later I knew Chandler and I have him read my draft. Not only him, a few other people as well.
All right. Well, I have on page 15 from your book, it says here, words to the effect, this book would not exist if Henry Lacard had not found it at Steve Hedder's place, and if Hedder and David Chandler had not encouraged me to publish it. That's on page 15 of your book. It's in French. It was translated for me. Is that about right?
Yes. Let me clarify that I already concluded my draft or finished my draft before the encouragement for me to publish it.
Did I stand corrected? The encouragement was for the publishing, not for the writing of it. Now, based on that, can we draw any conclusions that you might have had an association with David Chandler, that you might have spoken to him prior to him coming across a draft of your manuscript? In other words, have you met the gentleman before that, and have you spoken to him at any point in time?
In general, authors, when they complete their manuscripts, they would distribute among themselves to review. And I was in the same situation. I share my transcripts for review with some of my peers. And it was done in that sense.
All right. Well, were you aware that you're featured in David Chandler's book, The Tragedy of Cambodian History, which was initially with a copyright of 1991? and with a South Asian edition of 1993 reprinted in 1994. Were you aware that you're mentioned in his book?
No, I cannot recall that.
Have you read any of his books? And let me go on because it appears to me, my understanding, that in writing your own book, you did quite a bit of research.
I did some research, but when I read Chandler's book, I did not know him as the author. So the book that I wrote did not rely on any of his books.
All right. Now, if we could look at, it's D108/50/1.75, and I'm told this has not been translated into either French or Khmer, so I'll just read it, and this is from ERN number 00193374. Here he says that Hung was affiliated with the UEK rather than the more extreme Union Nationale des Étudiants Khmer, UNEK, the Maoist organization to which Koltuch's son belonged. Is that an accurate statement that Mr. Chandler makes about you?
Yes, that is correct. I always encourage the Cambodian students to reunite together despite their different tendencies toward different factions. I also had contact with all those who either leaned toward the French party or toward the Chinese party.
I just want confirmation of what he's saying to make sure that it's accurate. He then goes on to say some 30 members of the UNEK, including Tuch's son, were allowed back into Cambodia in 1973 after being vetted by Cambodians in Beijing. Students like Hung, who were affiliated with the UEK, were told to wait and none returned home until after April 1975. Now, is that accurate to your understanding?
That is the opinion of the author. It is not my statement, because I myself did not submit a request for my return to the country.
All right, so to make sure, you did not request to go back to Cambodia on or about 1973 or 74, where you would have had to go to Beijing and be vetted out. No requests were made by you.
I never made such a request to go back in either 73 or 74.
All right, thank you. Now, he goes on to say that in 1974, Huang and others in the movement went to Bucharest to meet Ieng Sary, who was traveling with Sihanouk. Now, I've listened to your testimony yesterday and the day before, and you never mentioned anything about going to Bucharest in 1974. Can you please tell us whether Mr. Chandler has it accurate? In other words, did you go to Bucharest in 1974?
Yes, I went to Bucharest in 1974.
Now, you've told us that by this point, the Khmer Student Union has been dissolved. Did you go there on your own account, or did you go there as part of an association or group? And if so, what was the group or association?
I went, as the rest of us, in the name of a member of the Funk Students Association. And in 1974, he made a visit with Sihanouk to Romania, Albania, and Yugoslavia.
And what was the purpose for you traveling all the way from Paris or wherever you were in France all the way to Bucharest in 1974? Why go there?
Officially, the Fung Students Association assigned some students to meet with Norodom Sihanouk, who was the president of the front. And after we met with Samdech Sihanouk, we subsequently met with Ieng Sary.
All right. Now, when you met with Sihanouk and Ieng Sary, did you ask any questions? Or was it just a social event?
I cannot recall whether I asked any question.
All right. Well, maybe I shouldn't say you in particular. Did the group go there to perhaps get some information from Prince Sihanouk and Mr. Ieng Sary, and also perhaps have questions of their own answered by these two individuals who were representing Funk?
I cannot recall if any of the students put some question to Ieng Sary. It is the custom of the students just to be the audience to the speech made by Prince Sihanouk and not to put any question to him, not like the way you are doing now.
All right. Okay, well then, can you please tell us, this must have been a memorable event, going to meet the prince all the way in Bucharest. Can you please tell us what his message was to the students coming from Paris, who were essentially the representatives of Funk in Paris?
I cannot recall what he said, but we met him. He talked about whom he met, but I did not take note in any other things or made any other observations.
All right, let me make sure I get this straight. He's there on behalf of Funk to give information. Are you telling us that from that meeting today, you don't remember whether he talked about what was happening in Cambodia, how the struggle against Leno was going, what the plans might be for the future? You're drawing a blank. Is that your testimony today?
I don't say he didn't say anything, but I did not pay particular attention to the fact that he made this president of this country or that president of that country. Maybe he also talked about the situations back home, but I just simply cannot recall it.
Let me ask you one final question before we run out of time today. And this is again from the same page in Chandler's book. He goes on to say, in the second half of 1975, perhaps 30 Khmer expatriates were brought into Cambodia from Europe, in particular from the Soviet bloc via Beijing. But it was not until April 1976 that Huang and his wife received permission to travel in the fourth group of returnees, each of which numbered about 40 men and women. Now, you've told us when you came back, but my question is, were you waiting for permission to come in? In other words, from the time Phnom Penh had fallen in April 1975, were you putting in requests to return to Cambodia, and it wasn't until a year later that you and your wife were actually granted permission to come to Cambodia via Beijing?
Back then it was up to Angkar. When Angkar needed us, they would call us and we had to come back.
All right. Well, maybe something was lost in translation. I'm not asking whether they called you. I'm asking you, sir, whether you had requested permission. In other words, you voluntarily wanted to come back as early as April 75 and had to wait for permission to be granted to come in. There's a nuance there that's rather significant.
But
yes, we put a request. All of us put a request. And I also put a request for permission to return to Cambodia. And with the permission, then I came back.
Mr. President, I'm going to be moving on to another chapter, plus it's a couple minutes after 4. I'm in your hands.
Mr. President, you may continue, Counsel.
Thank you, but I'm going to need at least another hour with this gentleman. So we're not going to finish today because also the Kyu Sampon team has questions. I didn't want to exercise jurisdiction over the clock.
There might have been loss in translation. Of course, I thought that you had only a little more time to put the question to the witness. Probably there was loss in translation in Khmer, and if you still had an hour or so of the question times, then we need not have to ask you to proceed, because the time is now appropriate for the day adjournment. The time is now appropriate for adjournment. The chamber will adjourn here, and the hearing will resume on Monday, the 13th of August, starting from 9 o'clock in the morning. And on Monday next week, we will resume hearing the testimony of Mr. Suong Si Kun, and we will begin by the question by the defense team, and alternatively we will have Mr. Ong Tung Hoon as an alternate witness in case there was a health issue with Mr. Suong Si Kun. So Mr. Ong Tung Hoon, your testimony has not yet been concluded, so the chamber will invite you to come to the court on Monday next week. Court officer is instructed to coordinate with the witness support unit to facilitate the accommodation and transport of the witness, and have him back to the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia again on Monday next week as an alternate witness in case Mr. Suong Si Kun's health is not good enough to continue providing his testimony. Security guards are instructed to bring the co-accused to the detention facility and bring them back to this courtroom before 9 o'clock on Monday next week. The court is now adjourned.